Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Dell Hymes in Discourse Analysis. Dell Hymes was an influential figure in the development of the ethnography of communication, a framework that integrates linguistic and anthropological perspectives to understand how language is used in social contexts. His work has had a significant impact on discourse analysis by emphasizing the importance of studying language within its cultural and social environments. Hymes introduced concepts that have become fundamental to understanding communication as a culturally embedded practice, rather than merely a system of abstract linguistic rules. 1. Key concepts of Dell Hymes in Discourse Analysis. Communicative competence. One of Hymes' most influential contributions is the concept of communicative competence. Unlike Noam Chomsky's concept of linguistic competence, which focuses solely on a speaker's knowledge of grammatical rules, Hymes' communicative competence includes knowing how to use language appropriately in various social contexts. This means understanding the cultural norms, expectations, and social rules that guide how language is used in different situations. Relevance to discourse analysis. Application. In discourse analysis, Hymes' concept of communicative competence helps analysts understand why people choose certain forms of language in specific contexts, and how these choices are shaped by social and cultural norms. For instance, the way people greet each other can vary widely depending on the social context, cultural norms, and the relationship between the speakers. Example: in a business meeting in Japan, communicative competence includes not only the ability to speak Japanese but also the knowledge of when to use formal versus informal language, how to bow appropriately, and when to exchange business cards, all of which are essential for successful communication in that context. The speaking model. Dell Hymes developed the speaking model as a comprehensive framework for analyzing the components of communicative events. This model is an acronym representing the different elements that make up any communicative situation. Situation, setting and scene. The physical and social context where communication occurs. Participants. The people involved in the communication, including their roles and relationships. Ends. The purposes or goals of the communication. Act sequence. The structure and order of the communicative acts. Key. The tone, manner, or spirit in which the communication takes place. Instrumentalities. The channels and forms of communication, such as spoken, written, or nonverbal language. Norms. The social rules governing the interaction. Genre. The type of communicative event, such as a conversation, story, or lecture. Relevance to discourse analysis. Application. The speaking model is particularly useful in discourse analysis for breaking down and systematically analyzing communicative events. It allows analysts to consider all the elements that influence how communication occurs and is understood in a particular context. Example: in analyzing a religious service, the setting might be a church. The participants could include a priest and congregation. The ends could involve worship and community bonding. The act sequence might include a sermon followed by hymns. The key could be solemn. The instrumentalities might include spoken prayers and singing. The norms would dictate respectful behavior, and the genre would be a religious ritual. Speech community. Hymes introduced the concept of a speech community to emphasize that language use is deeply embedded in the social practices of a group. A speech community is a group of people who share the same norms and rules for using language, even if they speak different dialects or languages. Relevance to discourse analysis. Application. Understanding speech communities is crucial in discourse analysis because it highlights that language use is not just an individual activity but a social one. Language practices are shaped by the shared norms, values, and expectations of the community. Example: the academic community can be considered a speech community where members share specific ways of using language, including specialized vocabulary, formal writing styles, and norms for presenting arguments and evidence. Point 2. Dell Hymes' influence on discourse analysis. Dell Hymes' work has had a lasting influence on discourse analysis, particularly in the following ways. Integrating culture and language. Hymes' emphasis on understanding language use within its cultural context has influenced discourse analysts to consider how cultural norms and social structures shape communication. Holistic approach to communication. By focusing on communicative competence and the various elements of communicative events, Hymes encouraged a more holistic approach to analyzing language. This approach goes beyond syntax and grammar to include the social meaning and functions of language. Practical frameworks. The speaking model provides a practical framework for analyzing discourse in a systematic way, making it easier to consider all the relevant factors that influence communication in different contexts. Conclusion. Dell Hymes made significant contributions to discourse analysis by broadening the scope of what it means to analyze language. His concepts of communicative competence, the speaking model, and speech communities have provided valuable tools for understanding how language operates within specific cultural and social contexts. Hymes' work encourages analysts to consider not just the structure of language, but also its function in real-world communication, making his ideas central to the field of discourse analysis. Frequently asked questions. Who is Dell Hymes, and what was his contribution to discourse analysis? Dell Hymes was a linguist and anthropologist who significantly influenced discourse analysis by integrating linguistic study with social and cultural contexts. His work emphasized the importance of understanding language as a socially embedded practice, leading to the development of concepts like communicative competence and the speaking model, which have become essential tools in discourse analysis. What is communicative competence, and how does it differ from Chomsky's linguistic competence? Communicative competence, as introduced by Hymes, refers to the ability to use language appropriately in various social contexts, considering cultural norms, expectations, and social rules. This contrasts with Noam Chomsky's linguistic competence, which focuses solely on the knowledge of grammatical rules. Hymes' concept includes not just knowing the language but also understanding how to use it effectively in different situations. How is communicative competence relevant to discourse analysis? In discourse analysis, communicative competence helps analysts understand why people use specific forms of language in particular contexts and how these choices are influenced by social and cultural norms. For example, in a business meeting in Japan, knowing when to use formal language, how to bow, and the protocol for exchanging business cards are all aspects of communicative competence essential for successful communication. What is the speaking model, and how does it apply to discourse analysis? The speaking model is a framework developed by Hymes to analyze communicative events systematically. It stands for situation, the physical and social context; participants, the people involved in communication; ends, the goals of communication; act sequence, the structure of communicative acts; key, the tone or manner of communication; instrumentalities, the forms and channels of communication; norms, the social rules governing interaction; genre, the type of communicative event. This model is used in discourse analysis to break down and examine all elements that influence communication in a particular context. Can you provide an example of using the speaking model in discourse analysis? For instance, when analyzing a religious service. Situation, a church setting. Participants, the priest and congregation. Ends, worship and community bonding. Act sequence, a sermon followed by hymns. Key, solemn and reverent tone. Instrumentalities, spoken prayers and singing. Norms, respectful behavior. Genre, religious ritual. This comprehensive analysis helps to understand how each element contributes to the overall communicative event. What is a speech community, and why is it important in discourse analysis? A speech community is a group of people who share norms and rules for language use, even if they speak different dialects or languages. In discourse analysis, understanding speech communities is crucial because it highlights how language practices are socially driven, shaped by the shared values and expectations of the community. How does the concept of a speech community apply to discourse analysis? In discourse analysis, the concept of a speech community emphasizes that language use is a collective social activity rather than just an individual one. For example, the academic community can be seen as a speech community with its own norms, such as the use of specialized vocabulary, formal writing styles, and specific ways of presenting arguments and evidence. What lasting influence has Dell Hymes had on discourse analysis? Dell Hymes has had a lasting impact on discourse analysis by integrating culture and language, encouraging the study of language within its cultural and social context, promoting a holistic approach, focusing on communicative competence and the elements of communicative events to understand the social meaning of language, providing practical frameworks, developing tools like the speaking model for systematically analyzing communication in context. How does Hymes' work encourage a holistic approach to discourse analysis? Hymes' work promotes a holistic approach by going beyond the study of syntax and grammar to include the social functions and meanings of language. By considering communicative competence and the various elements of communicative events, discourse analysts can better understand how language operates in real-world situations. Why is Dell Hymes' work considered central to the field of discourse analysis? Hymes' work is central to discourse analysis because it broadens the scope of language study to include social and cultural dimensions. His concepts provide essential tools for understanding how language functions within specific contexts, making his ideas foundational for analyzing communication as a culturally embedded practice.